We're going live, and I'll hit record. They play the Royals tomorrow. Cole starts, right?
Yes.
And then
Boston
this weekend. 4.5 out, 4 in the loss column. No AL East teams play today.
Okay.
That's
interesting.
All right. Count us down. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome inside an exciting edition of our little Yankees podcast. Josh, we've been yearning for it for weeks, and I finally bring back exciting in the intro because it was exciting. It was an exciting week, folks, and as you can see, just based off of the live video, if you're watching with us on YouTube or you're watching back, or if you're going to be listening on our pod, which you're going to hear in a few minutes, it's me and Josh, the dynamic duo today. Josh Ere hanging out with Mets fans, watching the Islanders, just not giving any dedication to the Olip family. And you know what? It hurts. It hurts.
We knew this day would come.
Yep, it's true. He did not bail on us for any reason other than his own selfishness. And we love Ere, but you know what? After weeks of heartbreak, he couldn't be here for the turnaround. Brutal.
Well, that's what you get.
It's true. Absolutely. So, Josh, we've teased it a little bit, but it's been weeks. We were looking for things to talk about. For the last 2 weeks, we've come on this podcast just talking about what are the Yankees going to do? How are they going to get better? What are they going to be able to put on the table to show us that they are dedicated? We heard Aaron Boone talk about the sense of urgency, but we had yet to see it. And really, this past week could have been the worst week for them, arguably, of all the weeks they had. You go up against two really good opponents, a big AL West contender in Oakland, and then, of course, your divisional opponent and a team that has absolutely had your number this year in Toronto. And not only do they rise to the occasion, they sweep the Blue Jays. They win 2 out of 3 after losing the first game against the Oakland A's. And, hey, after being 8 games back at the start of last week, they're now 4.5 back, 4 in the loss column of the top spot in the American League East, and that's all we could ask for.
Yeah, they gained a ton of ground in just one short week. And you know what? They played 6 games. So yeah, I mean, that's all you can ask for. What we've been looking for, before, like when they first started playing better at the end of April and into May, we kept talking about how they just needed to keep stacking series, keep winning series. And that's what they did last week, sweeping Toronto and then securing the series against Oakland with a victory yesterday. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, like, we're not going to sit here. I'm not at least going to sit here and fully buy back in yet because, I still think that there's some things I need to see before I'm ready to sit here again and say, like, okay, now I feel very confident. But this was a giant step in the right direction. And from where we were last week, the week before that, that's kind of just what we were looking for, was just give us some sign of life, show us something, and to make us think that, like, it won't just be a completely lost season. Let us get involved into this race. And so, yeah, they're right back where they want to be. I mean, they're not where they want to be, but where they need to be with given the circumstances that they set for themselves with the way they started. So, yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about it, but they have a huge series coming up this weekend against first place Red Sox. So they have an opportunity to continue to just dig into the ground that they, have to make up, and we'll see what happens. But you have to feel much better about things.
They lucked out partially because Tampa Bay's now lost 6 in a row, and Boston kind of had a wishy-washy weekend. Was it Tampa or was it Boston who got swept by the Mariners?
Tampa got swept.
It was Tampa. So yeah. But Boston didn't really play that well this weekend either, and so they got lucked out by that. Now, to your point, there is one thing I can definitely say the Yankees did not do when they were stacking series a month ago, and that was have impressive wins where they came from behind to win the game, and that was what they did in this 6-game stretch. The 5 of the 6 wins that they had, all 5 of their wins this week, were wins in which they came from behind after trailing in the contest, and it started in the first game against Toronto. After we kind of ethered them on Monday, like we have seemingly done all these past Mondays, Josh, they really could have laid down and died, because not only were they down in that game, but they were down big, and it started off awful, and the urgency wasn't there. And you and me and E-Ray, we were saying to each other, here we go again. They're going to lose to Toronto in this first game. They won't be able to get out of their own way. But they eventually come back. They get some big hits, and they win the game for the first time all year in a contest in which their opponent scored 5 runs or more. So they checked off that box of something they had yet to accomplish this season. They go forward. They then win the next couple of games while they were trailing. Their starters were not really that great for the first couple innings of pretty much every single game this week. They gave up runs in the first inning, but a sign of a good team, a sign of a team that I know you and I can trust in terms of eventually being able to go out there and say we're not concerned with this team, is being able to be punched in the mouth and then be able to come back. And so I was impressed by that. That was something I don't think we saw at all from this team. Even going back to those series against like the White Sox and stuff like that, there was no adversity to overcome and then win the game.
Yeah, I was going to say that we talked about that earlier in the season about how they never, if they get down, it felt like the game was over pretty much as soon as that would happen, and they never really, showed us that they had it in them to climb back. Yeah. But that changed this week, like you said, all 5 of the wins were come from behind fashion. I mean, a 1-run deficit, it still counts as a come from behind victory, but it's not, the same as what they did, which like you mentioned against Toronto in the first game where they were down, what was it, 5-1? Oh, sorry, it was, what was it? No, it was 2-0. And then they scored 1 and Toronto's responded with 3 after that. So that was an impressive come from behind victory, just like the rest of them were. And like you said, that's how that's what the Yankees have always done, is they've been able to overcome deficits because they've always been a powerful offensive team. And this year that hasn't been the case, but that's a nice sign to show us that, there is some life there and that there's still, good baseball in that team to actually, showcase to the fans. So like you said, it's one step closer to getting us to trust them. That's a good sign to see that, because you then don't feel defeated as soon as they get down 1-0 or 2-0. You believe that you have a chance to still win that game. And on that note, the offense since Minnesota has been significantly improved. So I think this is now, something that we can maybe feel a lot better about. Is that
absolutely?
Is that?
So I'm curious how much that coincides with the change with what the pitchers are doing and their lack of ability to use the quote unquote sticky stuff. And MLB today, the day we record this, the 21st, is the official day that they're doing like the Major League Baseball checks of like the pitchers and stuff like that. So I'm curious. I'm pretty sure that sort of that big crackdown was obviously that series with Donaldson talking about like going into that. And so you would assume the pitchers probably weren't going to be doing it then. And that was really when they started to like beef up their offense and be able to hit. Yeah.
I'm not sure if we'll ever know, but the timing of it seems like that does have something to do with it, which, I think we talked about that maybe last week or 2 weeks ago about, is that going to be a good thing for them? And at this point, probably looks that way. I mean, like I said, I don't know if we'll ever be able to know for sure that the Yankees turned their offense around because or not because of the change in the sticky stuff. But so far, the signs point to that possibly having an impact. So, if baseball is really going to crack down on it, and if managers really are going to throw the gentleman's agreement out the window and, have umpires go and check the other team's pitchers, then that's a good sign for the Yankees, because maybe they will dig themselves out of it. And obviously that does affect us on the other end too, with Garrett Cole, but so far,
it hasn't affected him. Yeah.
So far he hasn't shown any signs of that really bothering him, aside from that one game, where the topic of conversation really first started against Tampa. But I think that's something that we should definitely be on the lookout for the rest of the season, just to see if we ever can confirm that is or isn't a coincidence.
Yeah, and for me, I was kind of thinking about this today. Think of the Yankees kind of like best offensive season that they've had over the last, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. It was with the juice balls.
Yeah.
Everybody was hitting home runs. Gio had that breakout year. Obviously, it was the year of the replacement guys as well. So whether it was Maben or guys like that who we weren't used to seeing having good seasons, or guys who we expect to have great seasons, guys like Gleyber Torres, guys like Gio Urshela, these guys who have now been a part of this franchise. It's like the juice balls helped them out. Granted, was that how they play every single day? No. But when they change the balls to the complete opposite of that, and you have pitchers really being able to utilize top level spin rate and things like that because of these stickier substances, I mean, you could only assume that it was probably going to be a detriment to the Yankees offense. It looks like now it's maybe self-correcting itself a little bit. And at least for them, that's the best thing that can happen for them, and that's something that you and I kind of just both really touched on in terms of what we can see going forward. But we would have to, I guess, check it out. Now, one person who obviously, without a doubt, has benefited from that, and we have to discuss it for a multitude of reasons, is Gary Sanchez. Because, Josh, you have heard me for the last 2 years, but really on this podcast for the last 30 episodes, because this is episode 30 of the Our Little Yankees podcast, get on my soapbox and absolutely destroy Gary Sanchez. I am a founding member of the Gary Hate Club. And no matter what you say, the fact is, over the last 2 years, it was justified, the hate that was given towards Gary. Offensively speaking, he was nothing like what he was in 2016 and 2017. He was inconsistent in 2018. Of course, he had some injuries. Then in 2019, he was awful. And last year, whether or not you want to count 2020, he was as bad as he's ever been as a Major League Baseball player. And you could say, oh, it's 2020 season, but he had 100 at-bats, 100-plus at-bats, and he just wasn't up to snuff, and it clearly affected him. But the last couple of weeks, starting before the Minnesota series, really the end of May to now, he has been untouchably good. He is going to opposite field, hitting doubles like he used to do. He's hitting 450-foot home runs. He's absolutely destroying the baseball, and he looks good. So that brings me to my point, Josh. I am here to advocate for all the Gary Sanchez haters out there and say, yes, Gary Sanchez haters, you are allowed to root for Gary Sanchez. And if you follow along with me on Twitter this week, you might know why I'm bringing this up. I'm not going to get into it a little bit too much, but the fact is, the way I like to think of it is all these guys play for the New York Yankees. And for the most part, we want the Yankees to do good. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole reason we're here.
We're fans of the team, fans of the laundry, as Jerry Seinfeld likes to say. So when players stink, it should rightfully be so, if it's backed up by the stats, and it's not just because you dislike the player, that you're allowed to get grumpy and frustrated over their inability to hit. And then when they ultimately come around, it's for the betterment of the team. Gary Sanchez is now helping the New York Yankees win games. Therefore, despite the fact that I disliked Gary Sanchez offensively over the last 2 years, I should therefore be allowed to enjoy in the fruits of the loom that is Gary Sanchez's offense. And you will not tell me otherwise. And look, I understand that there might be some people out there who dislike Gary Sanchez for a multitude of reasons. And for those people, whatever. Do I think that maybe that's more than 20% of the fan base? I don't know. My gut tells me no. But I would say that a hefty amount of fans of the New York Yankees disliked Gary Sanchez over the last 2.5+ years because he was a flat out awful offensive player. He was anemic. He did not get the job done. And rightfully so, you were allowed to boo him because he was a detriment to the Yankees offense and to their ability to win games. He is no longer that. Therefore, I say to all Gary Sanchez haters, come back on board the Gary Sanchez bandwagon. I, for one, am. I will be rooting him until he stinks again. And then when he stinks, I will rightfully give him shit.
I mean, listen, I think like multiple things can be true at the same time. I think you can look at results and the things that a player does and be upset with them if they're not good enough, but also still root for them to play well. Because at the end of the day, I would rather be wrong and happy than right and upset. So if if I, last season was kind of the breaking point for me.
Yeah.
And maybe I get a little too wrapped up in that because it was only a 60 game season, but he was just so bad and every game mattered more than it normally does. So I think it kind of ramped up the what the hell is going on here sort of thing. And it started off again badly this season. And after what we saw in 2018 was not good. What we saw in 2019, I feel like he had a very good first half of the season. He made the All-Star team, and I think he fell off towards the end. Plus last year, plus all the stuff with his defense, it just became a question of, is this guy really ever going to figure it out or really ever get back to the level that he was at his best when he first came up? And I think that was a fair question to ask.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we were rooting for him to play poorly. All it was that we had seen with our eyes that this was a guy who was capable of something very good and was not doing it anymore for various reasons, some of which we have gotten into in the past. But at the end of the day, the only reason why we get upset is because we knew he was capable of more. It's like this, right? I got upset that Mike Ford was on the Yankee roster because he didn't deserve to be on the roster anymore. I wasn't upset that he played poorly, but that was because I didn't think he was capable of more than what he was doing. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of a different sort of level of like dislike or whatever.
Yeah. And you more than anybody know that if Giancarlo Stanton goes on an MVP like tear like he did in 2017, you're not going to say, "Nah, fuck that. I hate Giancarlo Stanton. I don't want to be good."
And maybe, like that's part of being a fan. Maybe it's irrational that you can say this about somebody and say, I don't want this guy on the team anymore. I wish they would trade him, or I wish, they would just move on. And then you're, months later, you're right back into it again and you're all in on this guy. Mm-hmm. But that's just how it is. You ride the ups and you ride the downs. It's sometimes not about the bigger picture or about being on the right or the wrong side of an argument. My opinion on Gary was based on the results that I was seeing. Yeah. And same for you. And it's the same thing with Stanton. I know how good Stanton is. He won an MVP, but I also watched him play, 8 games last year? And did he even play?
It was 8 2019, and I think last year it was maybe like 15.
So like whatever it was, I saw him play like, including postseason, like less than 30 games or close to 30 games in 2 years. The reason I have been upset about that is because they need him to actually be healthy. So it's the same thing with Gary. It's not a personal dislike or anything like that, or, some stupid reasons to not like someone.
Yeah.
It's just about the results.
I said it before. I don't want to discredit anybody who might believe that there are ulterior motives to somebody's dislike of
there for sure are.
There, because there 100% is. But at the same time, what I would like to think is that people who like the New York Yankees, a large population of people who like the New York Yankees, don't go out there and say to themselves, nah, Gary Sanchez ain't it because he doesn't want to be it. The guy went to the Dominican League last year. He busted his ass to be able to go out there. You don't go to somebody's office and say, you don't want to do this because you don't want to do this, or you're not good at your job because you don't want to do this. That's just not true. Do I think it's a little ignorant that he doesn't know why he was benched last year? Yeah, because he stunk, and that was flat out the reason. So, but at the end of the day, it's like, Gary wasn't shitty because Gary didn't want to be good. He makes millions of dollars to be good, and it helps impact who he is as a person if he's able to be a professional and top-level baseball player. His baseball IQ defensively He's been working on it. I think the Yankees are just as responsible for screwing him up offensively because of all the crap that they've put him through in terms of what they've expected to do behind the plate. But at the same time, something that I think is really important is the fact that stats backed up how bad this guy was for 2.5 years. And now he is good again. And therefore helping the New York Yankees. And at the end of the day, it's not the New York Aaron Judges or the New York Giancarlo Stantons, New York Jerry Sanchez's.
Exactly.
New York Yankees. We're fans of the New York Yankees. We want the Yankees to be good. And just like if Mike Ford came up and all of a sudden was an all-star caliber player the second half of the year, I don't think you, me, E-Ray, whoever would say, nah, but like Mike Ford sucked 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So fuck that. I don't want him to be good. We'd be hyped because he's helping the team win games. And if Gary Sanchez gets a giant ass hit in the World Series, I'm not going to be like, yeah, fuck Gary. I hated him in April when he sucked ass.
Yeah.
No, be hyped because we won.
And I'll say that, right now we're completely wrong about our offseason opinions and thoughts. Now, I will say, to back you up, we never once said anything about the work ethic. We actually praised the work ethic because he did go to the Dominican League. He did come into spring training looking in very good shape.
Yeah.
All of these things that we've talked about, even all the changes that the Yankees have made to the way he plays the position, that shows you the work ethic because he actually...
And attitude-wise, he's always been like, you've never heard issues. No. Granted, it's not like the NBA where
but
it's like
teammates like him.
Is like but
his teammates like him and his pitchers like him. They always say that they like throwing to him. So yeah, like you said, he doesn't come with like all this sort of like off the field drama or anything like that. The only thing that you did mention was that he said he didn't know why he was benched, but whatever. I don't really think that that's such a big deal at this point. But like I said, we were wrong, and it's okay that we were wrong. And as long as we are here to say, yes, I was not correct about that. And it's the same thing I'll do if at the end of the season, Stanton plays healthy and he, ends up helping the Yankees make the playoffs and hopefully go on a deep run. I'll gladly tell you that I was wrong about that too. And that's, what it is. You can also give me crap for that. So the people who were still on board with Gary can't tell you that you can't be happy or that you can't root for him. Because that's not how being a fan works, because you root for the success of your team more than anything else. But what they can do is say, hey, you were wrong about that. And they can tell you, I told you so.
You'd rather be wrong and hyped that your team just won 15 straight games because of the guy you hate rather than be right and have them lose. And when Gary stunk in April, and as a guy who drives the Gary hate train because his stats frankly were subpar to the T, I was miserable, not because Gary Sanchez stunk, but because the Yankees lost games.
And you know what? Right now, he is basically carrying them.
Yeah.
I mean, this week, he probably is responsible for at least 2 of the wins. And on Saturday, his home run kind of got them closer and got them back into it. And I mean, yesterday they won. He had 2 of the 3 hits, and they won because of him. They won the one game in Toronto because of him, because he hit a pinch hit game-winning home run. So it's the exact thing that's happening right now.
Yeah.
We have been coming here every week upset about how the team has been playing. Last week, we also praised Gary in the midst of a rough week for the team. We said, Gary's been playing really well. I gave him the pop of the week when E-Ray didn't want to give one out.
Yeah, E-Ray didn't want to do it.
And it's okay, he's continuing to play this well, and now he is responsible for the Yankees winning games, and now we're happy because the team is playing better. That's just the way it works. And maybe that makes us stupid. Maybe we're too, reactive, and, we are too willing to just react to whatever is happening in the moment. So
but fuck that. That's what being a fan is.
I agree. So you and me are aligned with that, because I feel the exact same way as you. I think you disliked him more and you were over it before I was over it. But at the same time, we can be happy now because he's playing better. He looks like the guy who we used to see a few years ago, and they're winning. So what's to be mad about? Let's all be happy together.
I do have a question. Let's say, for all intents and purposes, the Yankees might not keep winning despite Gary being great. Well, a few weeks ago, we talked about potential assets that the Yankees would be able to trade. Do you think Gary Sanchez has rebuilt his trade value to the point where if God forbid they happen to fall out of it, but he was still playing good, they could get a nice little return for him if you were willing to trade him.
Well, I would have to go and look and see the teams in need of catching. I mean, pretty much every team probably could use one because it's such a weak
outside
position.
Of Kansas City, but
but that goes into the point of your question because I do, because the position is so weak across the entire league, both leagues really, that pretty much any team could use an improvement there. And maybe he won't give you what you want 100% defensively, but you can probably live with it. Just like we've been saying this whole time, you'll live with
the defense. If it's an AL team, DH.
Exactly. You'll live with the bad defense if the offense is good. And that's what's happening right now. So, I mean, yeah, I think if that were to happen, that's somebody that they could move to get, a decent amount for. But I think we have to kind of just think of that as like a worst case scenario because right now things are trending in the right direction. And maybe this is now a sign of the real player that we all thought we had on the team. And maybe that means that he is the long-term answer because a month and a half ago, we all thought when Higgy was the starting catcher every day, we all thought that Gary was going to be gone at the end, after the season. But now the story is completely flipped on its head. And I'm looking at numbers right now just to kind of back it up. May 27th was against Toronto. He had 2 hits, and that's sort of been the start of the hot streak. So in the 20 games he's played since then, he's hitting 344 with a 408 on base and a 719 slugging. So that's a 1.127 OPS, Damn. 6 homers, 14 runs batted in. He's hitting the ball the other way, which is something that disappeared from his game completely. And
the game yesterday with the 2 doubles, the reminiscent of 2017 when he had the big hit versus Houston.
That's what I was just going to say. When he was at his best, he didn't just pull the ball, and he sort of became pull happy in 2018. He's gotten rid of the high leg kick, which seemed to really mess his timing up for the last couple of years. And it took him a few weeks to get it completely out of the swing, but now it's not there. And you see he's turning on the ball and he's actually hitting it where it's pitched. If you look at the game-winning double yesterday, that ball's over the outside part of the plate. And what does he do? He just hits it to the gap in right center field. And that's hitting. That's not selling out for power. That's hitting. And that's the Gary Sanchez we knew in 2016 and in 2017. And he's back.
And for him, think about this. At his core, how many times did we say he's the best hitter in the lineup? Look at their first 4 now. DJ, who seemingly looks like he's turning it around. He's gotten a couple of big hits. He had a big home run in the first game against Oakland, even though they lost. His average isn't what you want it to be, but, it seems as like he's revving up a little bit. Judge, who is still the best player on the team, even though he's in a little slump. Gary, who now is the hottest hitter in baseball. And Stanton, who also is turning things around, and he's had a couple of big hits. Yeah, those are all righties, but those are your best 4 hitters. And right now, all 4 of them seemingly are on, or 3 out of 4 of them are on. And that's a formidable top 4. That's what we expect to help them win games. And, you said it, since the Twin Series when Gary was raking and Stanton started to hit the ball well and DJ seemingly started to turn things around, their offense is putting up 5, 6, 7 runs a game consistently. It's almost like when the offense works and you're playing your best players, things happen. Magic happens.
Yeah. And I was going to say, the 2 games that they lost to Philly after the Minnesota series, Stanton, I mean, it's not the only reason why they lost, but he had 1 at bat. And
Judge didn't get to play that Sunday.
And it's, I think like we talked about it last week, when you asked us, what do you want to see them do? And you said, play your best players. It's not rocket science. Sometimes we overcomplicate things. We overthink it. And it's sometimes just as simple as if all your players are healthy, you play them as much as you possibly can. And so far, this week, that's what they did. And it's looking better. And I'm hopeful that they won't treat the Royals like they treated the Tigers a few weeks ago and think that they can just take the next 3 nights off starting tomorrow. When, you can't really afford to be doing that. You have your ace on the mound tomorrow night. Let's see the lineup. Let's see everybody. Let's not rest people. We'll see what happens. with the catching situation, I know we're going to get into that. I have some thoughts and ideas on how we can work this out. And I think it involves moving a certain right fielder to play center field and a certain DH into right field so that our beloved Gary Sanchez can be the DH tomorrow, and we can still have Higgy behind the plate.
Let's talk about that right now, because that's kind of what the last point I was going to get on Gary Sanchez. What started my Gary Sanchez not love affair, because
Renaissance,
more of just a coming around, was the renaissance of last week, getting very, very pissed off about the fact that he was not in the game, because he was the hottest hitter, and it was going into that game that they just had the huge comeback in the first game against Toronto, and then they had that second game where you wanted them to get a win. You wanted to build some momentum, and he wasn't in there. And granted, he wound up having the big hit as a pinch hitter. Cole even said it afterwards. It was so great to have him in there to help pick him up in a game that they desperately want to win. But in that same game, you had Boone pretty much admit that he was the personal catcher. You had Michael Kay say on air that he was the personal catcher, and now you're caught between a rock and a hard place, because Boone says Stanton's not, quote unquote, ready to play the field until July. He says he's ramping himself up to get in there. Gary needs to start every day, but a detriment to Cole is the fact that he likes pitching to a guy who he has pitched better to in his career and with the Yankees. And I think he's only had one start with Gary here. It was opening day, I'm pretty sure. So
yeah,
we need to have the best lineup out there. It is inexcusable in any game, unless somebody is injured or it's a day game after a night game at this point, to not have Stanton, Judge, and Gary all in the lineup while all three of them are being able to play. So let's hear your thoughts. Hit me with it.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that there's a way to make everyone happy. If Cole likes throwing to Higgy, I don't want to upset that. I don't want to upset the combination. I don't want to upset. He's the ace, and he should, if he feels comfortable pitching to Higgy, then fine. Higgy has to play one day a week at least, because that's just the way the position works. So if it works out that it's going to be when Cole pitches, then let's do that. But at the same time, let's have our best lineup in there. And, you know, if the Yankees, I don't want to hear about lefty righty. If they're facing a right-handed pitcher, I don't want to see Brett Gardner in center field on a day that Higgy may be catching Cole.
Or Odor at second base.
Or Odor at second base, which is the other thing. Which I actually think that may be coming to an end. We'll get into the Luke Voigt stuff too. Mm-hmm. But I think just if you want to, the best way to do it is you put Higgy in behind the plate, you put Judge in center, and you put Stanton in right, and you have Gary DH. And I don't, you know, if you're willing to play Judge in center field, who we've actually seen get injured playing the field before.
Yep.
His rib and lung thing happened because of a diving play he made in 2019.
He's a great fielder.
He's a great fielder. But if you're willing to play him in center, then you need to be able to play Stanton in the field, because Stanton, we've never seen him get hurt playing the field. We've seen him get hurt swinging and running the bases. So I refuse to believe that he'll get hurt, or it worsens his chances of staying healthy if he plays the field.
And if he does get hurt, and I stand by this, at least he was in the lineup.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. At least then you could say to yourself, well, we shot ourselves in the foot, but heck, we want to win these games. We put out our best lineup to try and win these games, so that way we can win playoff opportunities by stacking up these wins and going out there to try and get us in the best position to succeed.
I agree. And so, yeah, I mean, what I would like to see tomorrow is Judge in center and Stanton in right and Gary DHing. I don't know if that's what we'll get. I feel like we probably won't. If I had to guess, I would say there's a 5% chance that that's what happens.
That's probably less. It's probably like 3%.
But yeah, so I mean, that's what I would do. And maybe it's true. Maybe he isn't ready yet, and he's not fully ramped up to play the outfield, whatever that means. So maybe it doesn't happen tomorrow, but it better happen for the second half of the season. If for as long as they don't have a real center fielder, because if you're going to take the risk with your franchise player, your best player, by playing him out of position in an area of the field where he has more ground to cover, more responsibility, then you need to be willing to take the same risk with a guy who's just as important to the lineup in order to make every piece fit and everybody gets what they need and what they want that's got to be the compromise.
And there's going to have to be questions because the fact is, we've talked about wanting Ketel Marte or Starling Marte, whoever it is. When they come, they're going to be playing the outfield. They're going to be a guy you're relying on to be a big second half piece, which means something will have to give. Most likely, it will be Garrett Cole having to, not to put it so bluntly, but suck it up and pitch to Gary Sanchez if you need to win games. Now, granted, the last two times, it's like, all right, it's June. You have the opportunity to give Higgy that day off and things like that. But like, big series versus Boston, he's lined up to pitch because there's 14 games left or however many games left against the Red Sox. Odds are I'm going to want Gary Sanchez in the lineup that day. And if they make a big trade for somebody who has to play the outfield because that's your acquisition, then that's what it's going to have to be.
Yeah. Well, I think there's another part of that too, is that if they do get a center fielder, they can still play Stanton in left, and they can still have Higgy catch, and they can still DH Gary. There's ways to make all this work and make everyone happy, but they have to be willing to do the one thing that they haven't been willing to do, and that's put Stanton in the outfield. And they've mentioned before that, they're working on it, or we feel comfortable with it, but then they never do it. So the fact that they're saying that they're going to work on it and they're going to do it in July, I still don't believe it until it happens, because they've done this before. They've told us this before.
I said it to you last week on this podcast. It is so dumb because literally when they started to baby him with the DH shit was when he started to get hurt all the time.
Yeah, and
it was literally like I said, it was literally the year he came over. He played 150 plus games, most of which were in the outfield, especially after Aaron Judge got hurt.
Yes.
The year he won the MVP before that, he was the everyday right fielder for the Miami Marlins. It's only been the last 2 years when they refuse to play him in the outfield that he gets hurt. And it's all these soft tissue injuries because, I don't know, you're sitting on the bench for 4 freaking at-bats and not doing anything. And I doubt they have a bike back there or some crap to get them going. So it's like, I think they're too lost in their own sauce on this shit.
Yeah, no, we've said that before. And I think last season, right, he in the playoffs when he was healthy and carrying them, he said, like, I've found a way to keep my body warm and active in between my 4 at-bats, which was getting on a bike in the clubhouse or wherever it was down there in the tunnel. And so, it's no wonder that that's going to happen.
Think of what you do as an outfielder. We've all played sports and we're not major leaguers, but it's like whether it's running to and from the dugout in between innings or doing your long toss and keeping your upper body in shape, playing with your fellow outfielder if you're in left or with the ball boy if you're in right field, having to actually run towards the 3-4 fly balls you might get a game as an outfielder, or just stretching and doing a different routine. It's like your body's going to be in more shape, probably more than doing stupid ass yoga to get yourself more limber, because you have to put your body through the rigors of playing. So
I agree.
Stupid, getting ramped up, stupid. I think it's just more dumb coach speak, because at the end of the day, the front office and Boone just want to milk as much time as they can of preventing this guy from playing the outfield, because like we said, they're too lost in their own sauce.
Yeah.
Anyway, kind of last thing to touch on with this past series, but it encompasses both Oakland and Toronto, is the starting pitching, because we're at a point now where it's almost as if you have Garrett Cole and 4 James Paxtons. And what I mean, and what I mean by that is James Paxton was horrendous in the first inning, and if we saw anything in the game against Oakland, or in the series against Oakland this past weekend, and the couple of games against Toronto in the beginning of last week, it is that early on in these games, the Yankees pitchers are shooting themselves in the foot by giving up early runs. And it did not hurt them, because in 5 out of the 6 of the games last week, they were able to come back. But there's only so many opportunities you will get to be able to put up clean innings with a subpar staff. And right now, that's a big point of concern, because you don't want to be going down in every single game after the first inning.
Definitely not. And I think it's kind of the opposite of what we saw, in May when they were playing well. It was the pitch. They were winning very close games. The pitching was outstanding. It was 30-something innings. The starters combined for it, no runs allowed. And now it's, kind of like the offense. We talked about it before, the lineup overcoming the pitching. And you don't want to dig yourself a hole. And we've seen that happen a lot in the last couple weeks. And this week they were able to kind of skate around it. But like you said, you dig yourself into a hole and it becomes harder to dig yourself out of it. You know that at some point the lineup is going to slump again, and it's not going to happen for you every night where you can come back from a deficit. Especially early in the game. There's something that it just bothers me so much when I see them get down by a run or two in the first inning. It's just a horrible way to begin the game.
Especially when you consider up until recently, every single time they gave up a run early, they probably lost the game.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, it's at one point it seemed like it was an issue with Tyone and Montgomery, and now it seems to be everyone except Cole. And at the beginning of the season, when that was the case, you can kind of live with that because it's just a couple guys, and hey, maybe there's an adjustment that you can make. Maybe you can even try an opener for one of them. But if it's happening for 3 or 4 of your pitchers at the same time, that's not something that you can really do. You can't just work around it. Yeah, you can't work around it for everyone. They're going to have to pitch themselves out of it. And it's definitely been a theme for Montgomery. Herman struggled with it the last couple times, and Tyone had a really tough outing in Philly last weekend, and his game over the weekend against Oakland was a bit better, but still not great. He pitched
that was the one game that they lost on Friday.
He pitched 4 2/3 and only gave up 2 runs, but he has trouble. He puts guys on base and he has trouble getting through 5 innings. He struggles second and third time through the order. But so, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how to fix it because there's nothing you can really do except, you know, we've seen teams do this before where they'll get a guy warmed up earlier than normal or later than normal to try to like work a funk out. But that's just maybe not how it's going to work. Maybe these pitchers struggle to find their pitches that they have working for them that night in the first inning. And the only way that they can work through it is by, you know, trying and maybe failing. Yeah. It gives us a larger discussion of, is starting pitching a need? Yes, but so is center field. And Brian Cashman spoke last week about that, about center field is the thing that he, you know, thinks that he has to key in on the most. And I agree with him. But at the same time, I'm also afraid of relying on Luis Severino, who we did see running over the weekend in the outfield, and Corey Kluber, who I believe had a catch yesterday or Saturday
with Severino.
Yeah. I'm afraid of relying on them because we already saw Sevy get hurt once on a rehab assignment, and Corey Kluber's been missing in action for the better part of 3 years. So it's a concern for me. I'm not ready to like say that, you know, this is my number one fear for the team and they need to fix it right now. But it is definitely something that bears watching, and it's going to be something that has to be addressed in some way or another. But I just don't know what they're going to do about it.
You know what starting pitching is for the New York Yankees? It's like a ghost that lives in your house. You don't see it all the time, but you know it's there, and it's always like a little spooky because that's literally the New York Yankees starting pitching the last forever.
Yeah.
It's that they kind of fix it here and there, but usually it's not fixed well enough to really, really make it a point of no concern. And especially because they, you know, no matter what you want to say, they cut corners on it this offseason. They invested money in a guy who had not pitched in more than an inning and a guy who had 2 Tommy John surgeries. And now whether or not they're healthy, and in the case of Tyone, he is, in the case of Kluber, he isn't, these guys are not top of the line level starting pitchers. You have Garrett Cole, who is a top 3 pitcher in baseball, the best pitcher in the American League. Make a case he's second behind Jake DeGrom. And then you have a bunch of 3 and 4 starters. Nobody there right now am I giving the ball to in the second game of a playoff series and saying to myself, yep, we're going out there and getting the win. Something that you knew you kind of were going to get with Tanaka, and that's why it kind of stinks that they didn't just go out there and spend the money on him, because you almost kind of should have known that you were going to have an issue like this, whether it was through injury or guys just not performing. And what stinks from that same perspective, Josh, is the guys who they kind of were going to rely on if any of these guys faltered, have all been either shit or injured too. Debbie Garcia is getting absolutely pounded in AAA. He has not
Yeah.
been good.
And he's
And
walking
then,
everyone.
yep, he's walking everyone. And then we talked about it, Severino, groin injury in his first rehab start. You don't know what you're going to expect from him. And the fact is, he could very well have what happened to Dylan Betances a few years ago, which is he finally comes back from injury and then he gets hurt again. It might not be his arm, it could be something completely unrelated. So it stinks because virtually by them cutting corners this offseason and them knowing that they were going to be up against the luxury tax, they have prevented themselves from being able to now make moves for starting pitching because they got hurt in other spots on their team. They would have needed to stay completely healthy for them to justify going out there and making a big trade for a guy like Max Scherzer, who granted is hurt right now. So that might not even be the big name that we all kind of expected would have been the guy who was on the open market for them to improve the rotation. So the question becomes, what is this team's rotation going to be? Well, if you ask me, what it's going to be is Garrett Cole, and then pray to God you get 5 clean innings from somebody so you can go and just give it to your bullpen to close out the rest of the playoff series when they eventually get there, which, shitty enough, is kind of what it's been literally the last like 5 years that we've watched this team.
Yeah. Well, I think you are hoping that one of Kluber and Severino comes back healthy, even if that isn't until August, even if that isn't until September. That's sort of what they're hoping for. But at the same time,
like,
you
fuck
can't,
that.
they can't do that because they're not in first place. They're not in a position where they can afford to wait around and treat August and September like rehab appearances for these pitchers who are very important to the team. You said, who are they going to give the ball to in game 2 of a playoff series? The way it is right now, if they make the wild card game, who are they giving the ball to in game 1 of the playoffs? Because Cole's pitching the wild card game. So who's pitching game 1? I do believe
Domingo Armand, probably.
I do believe that at some point, somehow they will address it, but it could end up being like what we saw in years past, which was Jaime Garcia or Lance Lynn, who now is just a complete stud, but they didn't use him properly. But it could be low impact moves like that just to really give you people who will eat innings more than guys who are going to like go out there and dominate a team. But
and on that same note, it never works out that way for the Yankees. I mean, Jay Happ was supposed to be the guy to get in that playoff series 2 years ago because he owned Boston.
Yeah.
And then he blew up in their face, and then we were stuck with him because they decided to give him a contract too. So it's like, I love Cashman, and we talk about the good and bad of Cashman here, but it's like starting pitching, no matter what you say about Brian Cashman, starting pitching has never been something he has been good at acquiring.
No, it's not been a strength. I mean, the good ones that come to mind are the slam dunk ones, the Mussina, CC, Cole, guys like that. Roger Clemens. It's the slam dunk pitchers.
Signings.
It's not the reclamation projects like the Jameson Tyones. It's not let's bet on the guy's talent and we'll get him in-house.
I mean, I don't think you could tell me a good pitcher he's traded for in his entire 10 years GM.
I'm trying to
traded for, because like all the guys you just mentioned, Mussina.
Well, Clemens was a trade.
All right. So, yep.
But that may be it. I would have to go back and dig through that. But like, you might be right. And it's always been an issue. And I feel like it's been an issue a lot more so in the last decade. It is. It really is. In the last decade, I feel like it's been a real problem. And it's never fully addressed the right way. I think in 2009 it was addressed the right way because CC and AJ Burnett had good years for them and helped them win a championship. But really since then, no.
That's what's so frustrating for me is you don't want to harp so much on like this team doesn't spend money, but it's like they weren't going to go out there and get him, but they could have just shelled for the 11 million that they went out there. They could have just said, you know what, fuck it, and spent a whole bunch of money to have Trevor Bauer be their number 2 starter. Were they going to do that? No, but the LA Dodgers didn't, and they're in the same position as the Yankees in that they have money. Now, there were obviously the off the field issues, and we know that Bauer was a head case, and he's somebody like that who's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So, maybe that wasn't a guy that they were looking for, but that's what we want. We don't want these short sales, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound type things where everything needs to go right for them, because then you get middle of June and we're talking about their starting pitching not being up to snuff again, which is literally the same talking point that we've had about this New York Yankees team for the past 5 seasons.
Yeah, well, I feel like they probably expected that the offense would be a lot better and that they would have had better luck with injuries in terms of Aaron Hicks, or just even some of the other guys working out, playing better. Like they probably thought Mike Tauchman would have been better before they traded him. They probably thought Mike Ford would be better. So they were probably thinking to themselves, okay, well, we'll be fine with position players. We'll have to figure out pitching. Like the extra money that we're saving under the luxury tax right now that we'll use at the deadline will be spent on starting pitching and maybe a reliever. But that's not been the case. And that's what happens, like you said, when you decide you're going to impose a budget on yourself that you probably don't really need to do. And, try to think outside the box with some of the moves you make. That's what happens sometimes. And so they're going to have to figure it out. And it's a real issue. And I'll give you said Bauer, I'll give you another name. Darvish was a guy who was traded this offseason. And, he has a 2.5 ERA for San Diego right now. Blake Snell was traded. Obviously that probably would never have happened in the division, but there were other players.
Lance Lynn. We talked about him. They could have got him back.
There were other players available.
I don't know how Morton's been for Atlanta, but that was a guy we talked about wanting.
I think he got hurt, but I'm going to look that up. I know that situation was a little different because he had said that he only wanted to play either in Tampa or in the South, where in Florida, like near Florida, where his family lives. So that was a different situation. But the point is, there were other things there were other things they could have done that weren't Corey Kluber and Jameson Taillon. But that's what we got.
More than anything, all of those can be put away if rather than be pissed about the luxury tax, they literally just say, all right, we'll give Tanaka the $15 million he wants. Get that one extra pitcher there, somebody who has been in New York, a guy who we all love. He's Iray's little Tanaka, going out there and doing what needs to be done for them to have a serviceable arm. So that way we don't have to talk about it like we're talking about it right now. Yeah,
I have nothing left to add.
That's it. That's kind of the best way to go about thinking it. As far as kind of wrapping up here, a little bit of housekeeping. You talked about it before, Josh. Luke Voit, he will be back on Tuesday. He'll have his opportunity to return to the team. Gittins was, below average. He had that big home run in the Toronto series this past week. He was a serviceable first baseman. He was cool to have the storyline wise and to see him get a shot at major leagues. But outside of that, it was just another one of these plug and play type guys. And now you hope that Voit does what he really was never able to do when he came back from injury the first time, because he got hit on that hand that first series against Tampa Bay. And then he said that kind of, screwed him up a little bit. And then he overstrained himself and he wound up hurting the oblique. So we'll see. He was raking again in AAA, which is what he was doing last time. And now we'll get kind of a glimpse about whether or not he's going to help really complete this Yankee lineup when he returns on Tuesday.
Yeah, they desperately need him. They miss Luke Voit for sure. The first base production this year has been horrendous. And frankly, they need I think they need him to, if they're going to really make a run and get back into the playoff hunt, they're going to need Voit to be what he was last year and what he was in 2019 before he got injured. But we'll see. This is a guy who's been hurt a lot, and it's just another one of those players who we can say that about. And
it's William C.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that with an actual rehab assignment this time, with a longer amount of time spent in AAA, he'll actually come up in a groove and everything will be right with the body and everything, and he'll play well. One thing I'm looking forward to, and we'll see about it. I don't expect it to happen for the Kansas City series, but I'm hopeful with Boston around the corner that it will, is Voit getting back in the lineup every day, takes Odor out of the lineup, and we can get DJ back to playing second base. And we can have the players that we should be having in the lineup in the lineup every day.
I mean, if you were to map out what the New York Yankees lineup would have been on opening day this year, barring injury, it would have been Gary behind the plate, Voit first, DJ second, Glaber short. You have Gio at third base, and then your outfield, in theory, would have been Clint, or in this case, Andujar, Aaron Hicks in center field, and Aaron Judge in right field. The only guy you don't have there is Aaron Hicks. You have your DH is the same in Stanton, so you're missing one guy in theory due to injury, which, knock on wood, is all you could ask for a team that is super injury prone in terms of their position players. To have one guy of your starting, 9 be down due to injury, it's like, it's the best you could ask for.
I agree, and in theory, that should be one injury is something that you should be able to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe we'll have a chance to see that play out in real life if Voit is able to come in, play well, stay healthy, be the guy that we know he's capable of being. With that happening, that keeps out the Odors of the world from the lineup, which is an issue. So yeah, like this has a chance to be a game-changing move, I think. I mean, we're talking about the guy who led the league in home runs last year and a guy the year before
got on base.
Yeah, and the year before that, he was playing at an all-star level before his injury kind of really ruined the year for him. Mm-hmm. So this could be another move that is really impactful where you're looking maybe in a week or two from now, you're looking at this team and you're saying to yourself, okay, now, we've got our guys back for the most part. We're now back where we need to be in the middle of the race in the East. And easily, in position for a wild card berth at the worst. So I think, listen, it's never a good thing with this team to bet on health because that's just been a big issue. But I am hopeful that he'll stay healthy and that this is a game-changing move for the team and the lineup. And now we won't have to worry about the offense anymore. That's my hope.
I agree with you. Absolutely. The only other bit of housekeeping to kind of touch on is the fact that you wind up having the starting pitchers have their comeback. Josh, you mentioned a little bit before in that Severino, we thought maybe was going to have a little bit worse of an injury. He was running the bases or running the outfield, and then you had Kluber, who's having catch with him. So that's just sort of, I guess, a kind of brief overlook, but nothing we have to go too deep in depth in. We talked about it before. Yankees pitching will be a concern until it isn't. So we'll have to see what happens with them down the line. Let's preview the series that are coming up a little bit, because something you said earlier in the pod, Josh, that I think is so perfect is they cannot overlook this Royals team like what they did with the Detroit Tigers. And the similarities are uncanny because that 3-game series against Detroit came directly before they played the American League East division leader in Tampa Bay way back when they had that last month. Now you have 3 games against the Kansas City Royals, who are, what you expect, not really that great of a team. And then you play Boston, who is leading the American League East. So we'll have to see. Will they be able to put a good lineup out there for these 3 games against Kansas City? Will they be able to not overlook their opponent? And will they be able to win? At a minimum, they should be able to win 2 out of 3 and then go and have an opportunity to face Boston to try and get some revenge after the Red Sox swept them.
Yeah. So with Cole starting tomorrow, the first game of the series, you automatically have an advantage there, and you have a chance to take the first game right away and then just worry about splitting at the worst the next 2. But I'm concerned that they are going to treat this 3-game series as a let's rest and make sure that we're lined up and have our horses ready to go for the 3 games in Fenway Park. I'm definitely worried about it because we've seen them do it before, and I feel like it was something that we sort of just accepted because it kind of worked in the previous seasons. But then when it happened against Detroit was when it really came to the forefront, and everyone started to pay attention to the fact that like this team kind of takes games off in the regular season and treats them like they don't matter. And this is an opponent that you would kind of expect that thing to happen again potentially. It's a weak AL Central team. They are overperforming the expectations, but they're still not a very good team.
Yeah.
And it's in your home stadium. So Detroit was on the road and they did it, and they're at home. So there's even more reason to think that this could happen again. I'm hoping that the sense of urgency that Boone and Cashman have talked about is an actual thing. It seems like it is with some of the games that we've seen and the moves, the pinch hitting moves that Boone made in Toronto were all really good. 3 straight nights he did it, and they all worked to perfection.
And they're first in every single pinch hitting category offensively.
See, so maybe the sense of urgency is there, and maybe this is the series where they decide, let's just step on a bad team's throat and let's get on a hot streak before we head to Boston, instead of let's just take these games and see what happens. And we'll probably win 2 out of 3 just by showing up. Yeah. That's not the team that they are so far this year. So put your best foot forward, which is something that we've talked about before, and go and win at least 2 of the games against Kansas City.
And they have Cole on Tuesday. So tomorrow, when Garrett Cole, or today, depending on when you're listening to the podcast, Cole's going to be starting game 1, and you get Voit back. So for a Cole start with Voit there, you said it before, Josh, put your best guys out there. If you're going to put a Higgy out there and not play Stanton, no.
Yeah.
Put Judge in center field, put Stanton in right field, put Gary at DH, and put Higgy behind the plate, and give yourself an opportunity to go out there and win this game for a Garrett Cole start, so that way you can start off the week right, get that first win to keep yourself in that win column, and then be able to carry that over. Because, look, maybe they don't win the Thursday getaway day that they always stink against, but they should easily be able to win the first 2 games at home against them and then head off to Boston. And for Boston, you know what? Get revenge. Red Sox, they were in first. They fell out of first. First time you get to go to Fenway. First time you get to see Red Sox fans since 2019. I'm excited to see the fans at Fenway Park, the Red Sox fans going bananas. It's been a while. So, to be able to carry those good vibes into this weekend and really test yourself after you were able to make up all those games this past weekend, because both Boston and Tampa Bay were not able to go out there and win. You know what? That's why you have the sense of urgency. So games like this matter. So you can get pissed off when the team goes out there and underperforms, and you can be hyped when they have a big victory. I know you and E-Ray and me were really hyped when they had that huge comeback against Oakland on Saturday. It felt like one of those games where the Yankees were able to, finally do something that we haven't seen this year, which is get our juices flowing. So do that this weekend in a big road series against the Red Sox.
I agree. Let's treat these 3 Kansas City games like they mean something and play well, and then take that right into Boston on Friday night. And let's make some noise in this division. Let's put the Red Sox back up against the wall. Let's not make it a cakewalk for them or for Tampa or for whoever else. Let's make sure that this summer is a good one, and a one where we're right in the thick of the race. And it starts on Friday. It really has already started, but on Friday it becomes hyper focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said, let's make this summer a good one. It's not ironic, but it's the truth. Today is the first day of summer. We're recording this on June 21st. That's the first day of summer, which means you have the rest of June, all of July, and all of August, and most of September, which is your summer, to get yourself in a division race, to get yourself into the position where, you know what, we don't have to worry about Garrett Cole starting a wild card game and who the heck's going to start game 1, because we already know you're going to get Garrett Cole at home if you have the opportunity to go out there and do what you need to do. E-Ray's not here. Last week you commandeered Pop of the Week, so now it's your thing. Let's get Pop of the Week this week from Josh.
Well, it's going to be the same as it was last week.
There we go, back-to-backs.
He deserves
I think E-Ray would be a little afraid to do back-to-backs, but
I think so too.
He's not here, so you know what? You're rising to the occasion, Gary Sanchez, and he deserves it.
I don't know who else you would give it to other than him. He's single-handedly responsible for 2 of the 5 wins this week. He had a big part in a third of one of the other wins. His defense in the game in which he hit the pinch hit home run in the 9th inning when Chapman was unraveling, and he makes the throw. Chapman makes a terrible throw to the plate.
Yep.
and Sanchez guns Vlad Jr. down at third. That game looked like it was about to take a very bad turn, but Gary stepped up in every way. And so for that, it's his second straight.
I agree. My last question for you. Yankees tied a modern Major League Baseball
We didn't even talk
record.
about this.
Yeah, at this point it's become commonplace. But they tied a major modern day Major League Baseball record. That was a tongue twister.
That was a mouthful.
Modern day Major League Baseball record with their third triple play. This was another 6-5-4 double play, or no, 5-4-3 double play. Which was similar to the one that Chapman had against the White Sox. They also had the funky one that was a little bit earlier in the week. They could set a Major League Baseball record if they get their fourth triple play this season. Do you think they will get it?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
So there you go. Yeah, we didn't even discuss it because at the end of the day, it's commonplace at this point. It's almost like whatever.
There it is again.
Another triple play. Yep. See, the first time when it happened against the White Sox, it was like, holy crap. And since then, it's the one. Well, I feel like the weird triple plays are always kind of like, because they're so weird. But the one yesterday was just like a carbon copy. Chapman, for the record, has kind of struggled the last couple of games, but
yeah,
it has not really mattered that much. He apparently said it had something to do with his hangnail. His nail broke or something like that. He's been working through that. So just kind of worth mentioning going forward. We'll have to see whether or not that plays out. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Not really. I just want to keep seeing more of what we saw last week. And I'm hoping that continues tomorrow night with our ace on the mound. That's a good time to keep things going.
I agree with you. The fact is it's summer and we're without sports. My basketball team, the Sixers, they blew it yesterday. They stunk. Your basketball team, the Knicks, they blew it 2 series ago against the Atlanta Hawks too. And E-Ray, who's a Nets fan, they choked it away in Game 7. KD's foot was too big for them to be able to get the win. So that's it. Sports are done. Outside of Euro, which we're all hyped for and is great entertainment viewing, there's no other sports. This is Yankee season, baby. NBA's over for all intents and purposes. So the Yankees, they have our full attention, and it's time for them to go out there and get the job done, right?
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. That's going to do it for us on our little Yankees podcast this week. As always, you can listen to the podcast wherever you find podcasts. That includes SoundCloud, Spotify Music, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts. Just search our little Yankees podcast, then hit subscribe. Give us a like and a rating and all that good stuff. You can also find us on YouTube. We post every episode live, so you can watch us while we record it. We usually record it on Monday nights. And then, of course, you can find the episode up the next day, which has our beautiful faces on it. And you're going to hear everything we talked about that week. Also, make sure you give us a follow on Twitter. We tweet the links out of every new episode of the podcast, as well as the video links in our link tree. Follow us at Our Little Yanks Pod, OurLilYankspod. For Josh Levin, I'm Julian Coltree. No Eric Ray Sepulveda this week. Hopefully we'll get him back from his Met fan extravaganza next week. We'll have to see, though. We'll catch you next time, folks. Go Yanks.